Hey everyone, good evening, at least from where I am. Good morning to some of you probably. Hope you guys are doing fine. I hope you had a couple of good weeks. It's been, I believe, 2 weeks since the last one, so I hope you had a good time during this post-lockdown, still lockdown for some people. As I said in the past couple of weeks, past episodes, some countries apparently are lifting the lockdown, even in the industry. So depending on where you are, you might be locked down still or not. But I would say that the majority of the people are still on lockdown, unfortunately. As usual, thank you for all the messages. Every week I receive like very interesting and lovely messages for supporting the show from all of you. And actually the tech highlight of the week is proof of that as well, so we're going to talk about that in just a while. But yeah, thank you for all the support once again. As we noticed this week, a couple of days or 3 days ago, and now in the beginning of the show, there's something going on, right? This teaser. Hopefully I'll be able to reveal what's going on for the past, that I've been prepping for the past few months actually. So we'll see when I'll be able to reveal. I hope that will be very, very soon. In the meanwhile, please register to know more. You go to complairvfx.com and you'll be able to register there. We already have more than a few, have actually a good number of registrations, which is a good thing. So if you haven't registered yet, please go there and register now. So that will be the actual way to know what's going on. All right, so let's start with the pandemic. But before that, let's take a look at all of you. Let's see how's everyone doing. Let me just see if I'm able to. Not this one. This one. Wow, so many things going on. So in here. So let's see. So hello from New Zealand, Montreal. Cool. Welcome back. Thank you. Italy over here. Cool. So Vancouver. Nice. That's good. How you doing, guys? Hope everyone. We have some of the usual viewers in here, which is always great to see. The loyal public that this show has. So thank you once again for all your support. And as I was saying, let's start with the pandemic as usual, right? So actually there's quite a few things happening this week. So it's no surprise and it's not news, I don't think, for anyone that the spikes in cases are on the run. Yeah, things are not looking so good, especially during this couple of weeks since the last time we had this episode. So actually the UK is seeing a huge spike in cases, and it seems like there are suggestions that a new lockdown could happen, and that's why they now have these new restrictions. Not entirely sure what all the restrictions are. I believe that at least you know, in terms of gathering, I think we have to have less people now. I believe 6 people. I think that's the top. And yeah, and that's it. In my country, in Portugal, that was actually out of the blacklist that I've been mentioning here for the past couple of episodes. It's now back on the list, which again is no surprise. I think this will always be like this, not only in terms of this travel restrictions and this, how they call it, hair corridors, if I'm not mistaken. That's how they call it. Of course, they will open and then close and open again, because these things is very volatile. So the restrictions will be lifted, and probably then they will come back, and I think that's gonna happen for until we have a vaccine. I don't see any other way, to be honest. It's actually in my country, Portugal, which normally, even though it's on this blacklist, but a lot of people were saying that the country was actually doing pretty good. Of course, Portugal has cases as well, and they're also changing the rules now from, I believe, next Tuesday. I don't really understand this wait, like sometimes a week, sometimes a couple of days. I don't get it, but that's what's going to happen. Also, France is planning tough new measures as well, and I am quoting tough new measures as well. So Europe, I think, is now seeing unfortunately, new spike in cases, and it seems like the number of cases, actually, not so much the number of deaths, but the number of cases, I think it's even surpassing what was happening in March, which is a bit scary, to be honest, I would say. Economy-wise, as we all know, especially in the UK, but some of the richest countries fell officially into recession. This is not something that happened during this couple of weeks, but both the UK and France, at least, they are officially under a recession. And I remind everyone that after the recession, the next stage is a depression. So not very good things on that front either. But it seems that from what I read, I believe today, the UK economy recovered substantially, but not, of course, to the levels of what was happening before the lockdown. But there was like a spike in terms of recovery, but still very far from what it was before. As there's no surprises in here, I don't think, either. Also, Dr. Fauci in the US, and Dr. Fauci, I remind everyone that he's the director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and he's part of the task force for this administration. He just mentioned, I believe it was either today or yesterday, that the American people will need to hunker down, and I quote, hunker down through autumn and winter months. So politics aside, I mean, this is getting a little bit scary again. I think this will all pass at some point after the vaccine is here with us. But I'm just giving you like the news of the week or the past 2 weeks regarding this issue as well. In terms of our industry, the VFX industry, things are pretty much the same. There's no much news as far as I could see. Actually, some of the productions that were still that were going, like peak productions, like the new Batman movie, some of them, including this one, was put on hold due to the fact that some crew members tested positive, which is, again, no surprise, because the crew members are, part of the public, as we all are. So that can happen to anyone. And actually, on the Batman case, it was actually the main actor, Robert Pattinson, that tested positive, apparently. So hope he's doing fine, he's recovering. We haven't heard anything opposite to that. So yeah, we wish everyone the best during these times. But again, our industry, of course, because it's so dependent on what's happening outside the studio of where we all do our work, we have this situation here. So because of all this, I can't stress enough, and it's a constant thing that I've been saying from the very beginning of this show, that this is the right time to invest in yourselves. There's no time like this, for good reasons. What's happening is actually coming from not such a good reason, not such a positive side. But I think you should all take this time to invest in yourself, because this will go away eventually. And you know, the more you prepare now, the better you'll be once this all over. And I think you become stronger if you invest yourself now, learning new things, as we all. That's actually why this show is for, and hopefully what's coming will also contribute to that, I believe. So I think it can be very special, but we'll see when that happens. Okay, at the moment, just register and you'll know more about it. And because of all this, actually, the tech highlight, as I mentioned in the beginning, is actually it's a double issue, this session, because we have a time blur tutorial by Chris Fryer, and this was actually a suggestion that came from the fact that he was on the show, and I think he mentioned that on the actual tutorial. I haven't watched the tutorial, I'll be honest. Chris, thank you for doing it, but I haven't watched it. I didn't have the time yet, but I will in the next day or two. But a lot of people are saying very good things about it, so I can't wait to check that myself. In the meanwhile, please check that. It should be very easy for you to know where it lives, and I will be posting as usual this on our Discord server anyway. Another thing coming from one of our ex-guests, it's a website that has curated good, and I quote, good tutorials by Josh Parks. Not only Josh Parks, but I think other people. I don't know exactly who else is involved, but Josh Parks is actually one of them, and it was one of our guests in here as well. And it was very kind to include this show on the website as well. So this one is actually very easy to say, which is newcompositingtutorials.com. So couldn't be easier. Very easy to go there, and we'll be able to check and learn very good things with it. Okay, and I believe that's it. Let's see what people are saying. Oh my God, that's epic. What's epic? That's Rafael. How you doing, man? Been a while. Hope you're doing fine. Guys, so it's time now for our tech corner. Okay, we were coming back to tech corner. The last session, which was a couple of weeks ago, we had the tech challenge. So if people would like to check that, definitely do. It's on episode 16, I believe today is 17. And today we're going to talk about something that normally, well, we haven't talked about it yet in here, which is particles. Particles can actually be something that some of you use quite often, and some of you can probably either never use it or very rarely use it, and that's only because the fact that depending on the type of company you're working for, the type of productions you normally work for, you either use particles on a normal, as your part of your workflow, the normal workflow, or you don't use it at all because, if there's some effects going on, the chances are it's coming from the effects department. But actually, it can be very, very interesting to explore some of the techniques. I'm going to give you on this one like a very high-level overview of the particle system. It's a two-parter, at least. This will be just the first one, but there will be more coming. I don't know exactly when, maybe in the next session. But this will give you, I believe, an overview, and I'll be talking about some things that normally you don't see or you don't associate particles with. So I hope you like this one. So let's go on the tech corner, and then we're gonna have our guest, and I think you're gonna like it as usual. Yeah, easy for me to say, of course. All right, see you in 2 seconds. Today we're going to talk about particles, and I'll try to come up with an example that will be a very simple thing and probably something that you wouldn't associate particles with, but it's going to be simple, although thorough enough for you to recap on certain concepts that probably you either don't know at all, like channels, or you don't know that much or so well how to manipulate them. So the goal here is to come up with a particle system that will give us droplets on, let's assume, the lens of our camera, but could have been like a piece of glass in front of our camera, say for example a window or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a particle emitter. First of all, let's make sure that whatever geometry, in this case whatever card we put in our 3D system, will give us exactly this aspect. And now we already covered this in other sessions, but we're gonna do the same here today. So you open a random card, generic card, and then a generic camera as well. Okay, and now the thing is, you're gonna link the focal length from the camera, whatever that might be, to the lens in focal of our card, and the same goes for the horizontal apertures. With this, you're making sure that the card is always in the frustum of our camera. I'm just gonna reduce the resolution because this is a 5K. It's just gonna reduce the resolution of my card to become one row and one column. Cool, so now that we have this, I'm just gonna move this aside, and this will be actually my emitter, and this will be emitting particles as a default setting from the points. I don't want this from the points, I want this from the faces, so I'll have a random distribution of our particles, and of course the particles will be shooting from that emitter, and that's not what I want. I want them to born and die within the actual emitters. So I'm just going to reduce the velocity to 0, and now I have that. So let's see how this looks like on my scanline render. This looks like this, a bit too flickery, so we need to reduce emission rate because there's too many at the moment. Okay, we need just a few like this, and they are born and dying very fast, so I need to extend the lifetime to at least something that will have the same number of frames of my frame range. Let's put this to 80. So now they start existing from the first frame, and they live for the entire frame range. Let's put this a little bit before, so you start your simulation a little bit before your first frame. I still think that there's too many particles, so I'm just going to reduce this to say 0.2. Let's say that I'm happy with this, and this will be my starting point for my droplets. So now the droplets, what happens is there's always some gravity involved, and some of them will actually slide through that piece of glass or the lens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a gravity node right next to the emitter. The default settings are too strong, so I need to just add a few zeros in here, and we're going to adjust this later on, okay? But this is what's happening. And now I don't want to apply this uniformly across all particles, so I'm going to go into the conditions tab, and I'm going to put this probability slider a little bit lower, so we just affect some of them. I'm happy with this, and now we can start messing with these particles. So the first thing to do, of course, this is too even and we don't have an actual particle. So let's create a particle, and normally for this type of situations I like to use a radial. So in this one I'm gonna just put a constant that will always be attached to my project settings, and now I'm gonna open a radial like this, and I'm just gonna change the values of the radial so they will take the input width and height, so they will be automatically adjusted to any situation. So this will be the width and this will be the height. Okay, so now I have this on my RGBA channels. I'm going to use this as my particle, but there's an actually very important thing to do, which is always to use a blend mat. Why is that? Because the blend mat, if it's not here, some of the properties of my simulation, like for example color, will be overwritten by whatever is in here, and I don't want that, necessarily speaking. Plus, if you want to use external nodes to change some of these settings as well, if you don't have a blend material node in here, this will not work. So I would say 99% of the time in my particle input, I always have a blend material node set to modulate. Plus, this will keep your transparency from the actual radial intact. So in this radial, I don't want any fall off at the moment, so I'm just going to delete this to something like this, and I'm going to make sure that this is a circle, so I'm just going to put this to a square format like this, and this will be my particle. So now I have my particles round as my actually particle input. So now what we have to do is to add some breakup to the shape of my particles, because they are too perfect and that's not very realistic to what we're trying to achieve here. So just going to drop a normal noise, and I want this noise to follow whatever format comes out of the scanline render. So I'm going to use a remove node, so I remove all the channels just to seal the format, and I'm going to use this to just create some vectors, and now I can start messing with the shape of my particle. See that this is already changing. Maybe this is not enough, so I need to reduce this so they will be even more weird shape as normal droplets. One thing that I also want to do is to vary the size of my particles. So I'm going to go to the particle emitter. I'm going to use the size slider, so they will be a bit bigger. I'm going to use the size range to give it some variation. And now I want to add those particles into here. So first of all, the particle will always introduce some blurriness. So I'm just going to drop a blur in here, and I'm just going to use that as my mask to blur my image here. Okay, so we can see some of that there. But this is not enough. So what we have to do is to create some sort of distortion. So we will distort things a bit more realistically. I have my distortion nodes that I believe we already covered here to achieve different things, but at the moment let's try to create something that's not going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be something alternative for you to use if you want. So the first thing you want to do is to, from these particles, you want to create also some vectors to distort your image. You want to copy the alpha channel into here. I'm going to use the same forward V, and now you're going to start using that to distort your image. And let's try to introduce that thing. You see that is definitely distorting the image behind, but this is not giving us the result that we want, because in order for you to have some sort of more realistic distortion, you have to actually blur the channels that you are distorting. That's when you start achieving a good distortion, because the edges of your channels, in this case the channels to distort, will be closer to the limits in which they live, and because of that you're going to create a more realistic distortion, similar to what you would do on an estimate. So let's use this, just blurring those channels. So let's see what this gives us. Let's maybe increase the size overall of my particles. Maybe we're going to go overboard to start with, and then we're going to start reducing. So let's say this one is okay. So this is starting to look a little bit better. And then you could also introduce some of this blurriness only on the edges of your matte, and you can use an edge selection. I have mine called edge matte, and I use this node all the time. So this will select the edge of my input, and now I can start blurring outside or inside. So let's see what this gives us. I'm going to use this directly from my alpha channel. Okay, so this will actually give me something interesting as well. Let's see what happens if I start blurring this outside. This will give me sort of an edge, which I like. And this is basically what the tool I'm about to show you does. Let's just plug this alpha and this on my image, and let's see what this does. So you can increase the distortion, and you can blur it more or less to achieve different looks. You can also invert the direction in which this is actually happening. Let's stick with this one for now, and this will be your droplets as well. So I think that this blur is a little bit too strong, so I'm just gonna put it down a bit, and now we have our particles appearing in our image automatically, and some of them will go down, and the speed will vary depending on the particle. We can readjust this, of course, and we should, but what's inside in here, instead of using a selection like this, I'm using a selection based on a matrix. These are my inputs, my particles, and then this matrix will actually select specific directions of my input, and this will be, for example, the bottom part, and this will be one of the sides. This is the similar way you can create fake normals, for example. I'm not going to get into what this matrix does, which is a convolution matrix. I'm just showing you at the moment what it does for the purpose. And then basically you're going to combine the two, and we're going to use them as vectors. So that's exactly what we are doing here. I'm just going to use this because I'm more comfortable with this, and I prefer this look, to be honest. I don't like this, so I'm just going to delete it. And instead, I'm going to create a new one based on my particles, but I'm just going to put this on top. If I want to blur that, I will have some blurriness on top of that distortion, but you'll see that this is actually taking the transparencies as they are. So I need to grow this a bit, otherwise I'm not going to reach the limit of my distortion. So I'm just going to use an erode, just a touch, and maybe use this as a Gaussian filter. Another one before, just to grow a bit, as a normal box filter. So I'll go until the very edge, and then the other one will give me a nice fall off. Let's just take this down a bit. You can blur them more or less depending on what you're going for. Of course, if this would be on the lens of our camera, this will have to be very out of focus, almost imperceptible. And you can also go for that look if that's what you want. You can either decrease the distortion or increase the blurriness in here, so you'll have just that effect there. You don't see really the droplet, but you see what the droplet is doing to our scene. And you can have the mix of both of them. Then you're gonna max these two results. You can affect more or less that look with that droplet. Okay, maybe this will help you a bit. You can adjust this to taste, and this is basically how you do it. So of course now what we're missing is the actual rain. So for something like this, I'm just gonna use a noise, very simple. So I'm just gonna reduce this to become 1 and the other one to become as big as I need to, and I'm just gonna reduce this guy. And at the moment nothing is moving because you need to move this up and down in this slider, and of course you want this to move down, and I'm just gonna associate this with my frame, but you'll see that it's not going to be enough. You see that it's really slow. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to multiply this by a variable that is not created yet, but I'm going to call it speed. This will give me an error because this is not created yet. I'm calling a variable that is not created. So now what I'm going to say is I'm going to add a fluent equalize slider. I'm going to call that exactly in the same way in the name. In here I can choose whatever name, and then I'm going to use this from 1 to say 200. This will be my speed, so I can now control the speed much better. Okay, so let's say that this is kind of what I'm going for. All right, let's just maybe do some of this linearity as well, and then I'm gonna use a transform so I can give it a bit of skew on X, so I'll have certain, just a touch of an angle. And now I'm gonna add this to my picture. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna blur this quite a lot, say at least 100, maybe more, because I want to have an average color so I can introduce that in my particle. So now I can multiply directly like this. Now I'm gonna add this with an operation that makes sense for me. I would say that either screen or plus. Let's try screen. Okay, and what will be the result without this? It will be that. So let's take it just a touch. Okay, maybe we need to introduce a bit more of rain, like that. Maybe just let the tropical forest a little bit less. And let's put some blur. By the way, this goes without saying, of course, but I'm not aiming for perfection here, just to get the technique going. So this is a way that you can associate something that probably you wouldn't remember, which is particles, to create the droplets, and use something very simple to create the rain. So normally it's the other way around. If you need to pass this script around, this will be very easy to randomize, because every time that you go here on your particles emitter, if you put this, now you have a different pattern if you change the random seed. So everybody could have different patterns, although with the same look, and that's exactly what the intention is. Let's increase the level of silliness in this example, just to illustrate a simple thing that can be very useful. So let's say that this is one of those globes that you have in Christmas, but let's say now that these droplets are steam droplets, so you don't want them to appear as if it was rain, so from nothing to something. You want to create and to grow them over time with a certain size. So let's create that globe kind of a thing at the end of everything. So I'm just going to put a crop in here, and I'm just going to drop a spherical transform. I'm just going to put this from light to long to a mirror ball. All right, so I'm just going to clean these things on top. Very bad paint job, but just to sell the point. So in here now, I don't want to have the particles coming from nothing to something. I want for them to grow over time, as normally steam does. So I'm just going to open a particle expression. If you go on your size and say that you want the age of the particle divided by the life of the particle, these things will grow over time. So let's see what happens here. So you see that this will grow over time. Of course, you can have the same effect by using a particle curve in here, so you can affect the size as well, okay, in here with the curve. But if you want full precision, this is how you do it. You want age divided by life. If you want the exact inverse, you put 1 minus age divided by life, but that's not what I'm going for. I'm going for this. And now in here, just with this expression, I don't have actually the power of controlling what's the actual size of my particle when they grow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable here called particle size. This will create a new slider in here, and now I'm going to say that this will be multiplied by that variable. But because this is an expression, let's use a temporary variable in here and say that this will be the value that I have on that node that I've created, and this I'm going to call p size for particle size. And now what I'm going to say is that I'm going to multiply this expression by that variable. So p size is going to be multiplied by this thing in here. So now I have control over the size of my particle. So now let's see what happens. Of course, you want to disable the rain for this example, and you want to put something here on the image just to fake the actual steam going on inside. So I just dropped these grades with a noise pattern that is moving slightly over time with an expression which is the frame divided by 30. So this will move a little bit, so the actual end look will be this. Very silly example. It's just for you to understand that you can do this type of things also with particles. So there you go. I've just added sharpen on the actual droplets and some chroma aberration. For this type of effect, I would probably add more than just one particle. So you have like smaller ones, probably with a different motion. They will grow slightly differently as well. So all of those things will add to the realism of the effect that you're after. Obviously, there's other ways to do it. Again, this is a very, very silly example. I'm not aiming for super realism or anything like that. It's just to tell you the technique and how you can use particles in ways that probably you wouldn't think of. Hello again, hello again. How silly was that example? That was very, very silly, right? Hopefully you got the juice out of it that you needed. Again, this was actually, I was trying to compile more examples in just one go, but it turned out to be like very big, so I've decided to have this in multiple parts. We'll see when I'll be able to show the other ones. And my intention is to come up with something, you know, a very simple example that will, we're not looking so much for the look of things, but more for the technique, because as I said, some people normally use particles and some others never use particles and they don't know exactly what they can do with it. And that's what my intention was. All right, but there'll be more to come, and we're gonna explore channels and all that stuff, which was something that couldn't fit in this one. All right, so what is time for now? Now it's time for our guests. All right. And it's been a while last time I've said this, but I think some of you at least will know this person from the community. Okay, I'm not going to give more than this away for now, because we're going to talk with this person in just 2 seconds. So we're going to start now, and if you have questions, please type them as soon as you can, because we're going to try to read them all, as many as we can. All right, see you in 2 seconds. Mr. Erwan Leroy, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, all good, all good. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Do you want to tell us, actually, before that, before we start our conversation, just to give people a little bit of context. So Erwan got in touch with me, I believe it was like a month ago or something, or more than that, saying that you watched the show, you came across the show basically, and you congratulate the show, and you offered yourself to be part of that. So I have to thank you for that. And it's been, like, as I said, more than 1 month ago, but only now I was able to to fit you in. So thank you very much for taking part in this. And as I said in the beginning, some people might know you because you've been an active member of the community for some years, actually, for I would say at least a solid 5 years, right? With your blog, your website, at least. We'll get into that.
I think it's about this time.
Yeah, so there you go. I was right then. But do you want to present yourself a little bit better for those boys and girls that don't know who are you? Probably they heard your name. Do you want to present yourself a little bit better? And by the way, you can tell actually where you are and what time is it, because this took a lot of effort on your part to be here. So once again, thank you for that.
No worries. Erwan, I'm from France originally. I started being interested in VFX in the early 2000s, I guess, when I was just a kid, really. I've been working in the industry since 2008, and I learned a lot from just at a level where I was starting to be comfortable with my skills. I started to say, okay, now it's time to try to share what I know, try to share what I've learned back to the community.
Which is always a good thing. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
In name of the community, or part of the community, I'll thank you for that as well.
Thank you. And I'm currently a compositor at Wota Digital in Wellington, New Zealand. So that's why I have full sunshine here, because it's just the morning.
Yeah, morning, really early morning, right? I believe it's like 8:40 in the morning.
It's 8:40 now, which is not too bad.
Well, for me it would be bad, let me tell you. But anyway, thank you for making yourself available at this time. I know that it must be difficult, I would say. By the way, guys, as I said in the beginning, if you guys have questions, because normally I say that this only by the end of our session, so now I'm saying this from the beginning. If you have questions for our guests, please start throwing them in the chat, and I'll be able to I'll try to read them as much as I can, as soon as I can as well. All right. So actually, one of our reviewers, because we're talking about questions and all that stuff from our reviewers, actually one of our reviewers, the one that I just mentioned in the tech highlight, Chris Fryer, in one of his last tutorials about a tool that he did with time blur, but doing that, I believe it was with the Blink script, he mentioned you as a source of inspiration in order for him to create the tool. I don't know if you watched that, but just to let you know that you have a fan in house. I'm not sure if Chris is watching this tonight or today, actually, but he's in the UK, so it will be night for him as well. But if not, yes, he mentioned you, so you have a fun with us, which is a good thing, I would say. And you just mentioned that you are originally from France, and you actually started your career, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, in commercials back then, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, and then you eventually transitioned to film. And do you want to tell us about the advantages / disadvantages of that you felt coming from that world when you entered in the more traditional film pipeline at that time? Because some of our reviewers probably they don't have these multi experiences as you and I have, for example, and they don't really know what the differences are or advantages or disadvantages. But I believe that there are some advantages and disadvantages as well. So, but I would like to, if you want to expand on that a bit.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I started in advertising. I did 3.5 years, about 3.5 years in advertising before I got my first film job. So I was working in Paris, a small studio that was doing a lot of flame, and a little boutique studio. We did a lot of advertising. It's usually a lot more fast-paced than a film pipeline would be. We could have a project take a day sometime. You would start on it, do a conform in the morning, do some VFX all day, and then deliver at night.
Yeah.
It could go up to maybe a month with a project I worked on in advertising.
That was a luxury project, right? I'm sure.
Those are the bigger projects with the bigger budgets, and they also look better at the end because you have more time on them.
Yeah, more time, yes, of course.
One of the things I like about advertising is that when you have a hell project, you know that it's going to be over soon. Or sometimes in film, you don't quite know how long you're going to be on it.
Nobody knows, it seems. Well, someone knows, but they don't tell us, right?
So I'd say that's the biggest difference. There's also a bit more generalist. When you're in, that's a good thing for learning the pipeline.
Yeah.
Because they tend to be smaller studios. Now, there are also big studios doing advertising, and there are a bit more defined departments. But, if you're a studio that's under 20 people, you're not going to have an FX department and a grooming department and a little bit of modeling on simple stuff, and you just, wherever you can help, you just jump in there and do some stuff. Yeah. And I've found it's been really useful for me to just learn more, and I've learned a lot at those studios, where all the time I've spent in film, I've really been focusing on compositing and very little else than compositing.
Yeah. And I'm sure during that time, correct me if I'm wrong, because, in a normal situation like that, in commercials, it's of course, you have more limitations due to the nature of the actual type of projects as well, and the nature of the companies that do those type of projects. We have to be a little bit of handyman, right? We have to do a little bit of everything, including pipeline and other tools, whether it can be pipeline tools or production tools or something like that. The same happened to me when I, for example, joined Milk. They don't do commercials, they do film and TV, but they were a very small studio at that time. And similar to what you're saying, I felt the need, because there was actually the need, but I felt the urgency of applying and start learning new things that otherwise I wouldn't, because there was actually a gap there that it was actually what the catalyst for me to start learning new things. And I believe in a situation like that, you also developed your technical side on these matters because of that. Am I right on assuming this, or am I completely out of the?
No, I think that it's not quite correct in my case. I was still pretty junior at the time, so I was still working up my VFX skills, and I didn't quite have the know-how to do pipeline at that time.
Okay.
So I didn't really get into Python and setting up more pipeline stuff until a little bit later.
So that came after.
Definitely learned a lot because I knew nothing coming into the studio. I was sort of I had a group of friends back in middle school and high school, and we would just do like little CG stuff for fun. And we were bad. We were really bad, but I loved it, and that's why I wanted to.
Of course, that's all. I would say that's the most important thing, right? You're having fun with whatever you're doing, good and bad. I mean, that's first of all something very subjective to a certain degree, of course. But from the perspective of a kid that is starting out, all of those things have to be fun. Otherwise, what's the point, right? So yeah, very important. But for some reason, because you're such a technical guy and you share so many technical things, I had the impression that probably that was born due to the fact that you started in commercials, and because normally the need on developing those things are more in those type of companies than, for example, film companies. That's what I was assuming, but apparently that came after, right?
Yeah, no, I started learning Python when I was at Zoic Studios, actually, back in Vancouver.
Okay. Yeah, I want to talk to you about that as well, because so you were in France at that time, and then you decided to go away from France, right? But you didn't travel to a French-speaking part of Canada, right? You decided to go to Canada, but to go to the English side of things. Did you do that on purpose, or it was like a chance that you took just because there was that need?
I was still pretty young, and there's this working holiday visa program that people from Europe and certain countries can take part of. And for me, I think the possible destinations were, I think there's a few places in South America. There is Japan, Australia, New Zealand, in Canada, and I wanted to practice my English better. I wasn't great at English at the time.
So that was on purpose then. So you ran away from your native language, your mother tongue, to develop the English. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Originally, it was supposed to be, when people would take part in that working holiday visa, is that go live an adventure for a year and enjoy like a new culture, experience a new culture.
Yeah.
But I also had my eyes on Vancouver before, because I knew there was a lot of visual effects going on there.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, let's go there and see. And so that's it. I got my working holiday visa and I moved to Vancouver. And I first got a job at a very small studio. I was doing YouTube videos.
No way.
Yeah. So yeah, cool. I was applying to all these big studios, and the thing I kept hearing is like, oh, you don't have any VFX experience. It's like, well, I got 3 years and a half. But like, yeah, but that's advertising; it doesn't count.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So,
which is silly, because I mean, and because you have this experience, would you agree with me that I'm sure you will, but I might be wrong. But anyway, this is my take on it. Actually, when you work on projects such as commercials, which is, again, not my preference, I already mentioned this here many times, it's actually something that is not for me for many reasons. But in projects like this, in which you have to improvise a lot, you end up learning and applying so much more different techniques rather than in a traditional film pipeline, because everything is so divided. Of course, you have other things that you have to be more, you have to take care more with a closer eye. But in terms of like learning the software, learning new things, going outside your comfort zone, you learn much more in those kind of places, because the need is there, right? It's something that they say, we have to deliver this. You don't know how to do it, man. Tough shit. You have to invent something, right? And in the film pipeline, that doesn't happen so much. Although they have definitely that posture, which is kind of a little bit of contradictory in this level. At the same time, of course, the visual side of things, it's very different, or it can be very, very different. And of course, film, your aim, it's a different thing. But in terms of learning new techniques, trying things differently, come up with your own voice, your own language, in terms of how you do things, your own style, you definitely get that more, you have more of that chance in a company as commercials or TV. What's your take on it?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I don't know that recruiters just refuse to hire people from commercials in general. I think that's not a problem. I think another thing that played against me at the time is that I didn't know Nuke really well.
Because it came from Flame. Got it.
Yeah, my whole experience was combustion and flame at the time, and a little bit of After Effects, and a little bit of Nuke. I was doing, I think, my last year back in France. I started learning Nuke, but it was pretty fresh, and I would take the CG into Nuke, and I would just do the CG part of Nuke, and then I would finish the comp in Flame.
Yeah, okay. It's like a hybrid kind of a workflow that you were going for at that time. Yeah, that can be something that was playing against you, yeah.
Yeah, and Nuke was definitely better in terms of multi-layer XRs. So it was convenient for me to sort of do a pre-comp in Nuke and then export a beauty and take that and do the final comp in Flame.
Okay, cool, interesting. Yeah,
I think that probably wasn't helping me. Then I got lucky. So I don't know if you've heard of Hydraulics.
Yes, I know the company. I know the name of the company. Yeah.
Yeah, and so at that time, so that would be 2011, 2012 or 2012. They were opening in Vancouver, and they happened to be using Flame. And I went to this job fair in Vancouver, and they had this recruiter from Hydraulics there, and he was asking everyone, like, hey, we use Flame? And everybody was like, no, don't know Flame, no, don't know Flame. And I was like, hey, I know Flame.
I know Flame. Like, there's a spot for everyone, right?
Give us a call. And I gave them a call, and then a few weeks later, I was starting there. So that got me my foot into the film world.
Yeah, cool. The world today is a little bit different. Because this was, you said 2007?
It was 2000. No, that would have been 2012.
12, yes. So the world today is a little bit different, but I think the positive message to take of what you just mentioned is there's a spot for everyone. There's a spot for everyone. So don't face yourself. This is a message for everyone who's watching that probably are feeling a little bit down because they don't know this or they don't know that, or in their countries things happen in a different way. Listen, there's a spot for everyone. And the only way you can reach where you want to do, or where you want to be, or what you want to do, is to knock on doors until they open for you, man. There's no easy way out. That's exactly what you have to do. But there's a space and a spot for everyone, despite of where you live, despite of your aspirations, despite of how lucky you are or bad luck you have, or whatever. As long as you're prepared, that thing will eventually happen sooner or later. So that would say that's my positive message from all of that thing. And then just to continue this conversation, you traveled also a bit after a little while. You've because probably you were going to Vancouver for just a while. You ended up staying for quite a few years, right? And then you moved a bit also. You went to China. You spent some time there, right? I'm sure that was a very different experience at that time, no?
True. I was just browsing LinkedIn at night, and I saw this, this ad of like, "Hey, we're recruiting for NPC in Shanghai. Apply here." And I just clicked on the website, and it was like a few clicks of click, apply, and I was like, okay, whatever. It's a random thing that you do at night because why not? And I go brush my teeth and get ready to go to bed, and then my phone rings and be like, "Hey, this is the recruiter from NPC."
No way! Immediately after.
Yeah, like an hour later.
Wow. All right.
And started talking with them, and after a bit of back and forth, they said like, "Yeah, we'll hire you for NPC Shanghai." So I actually did fly to Japan, and I just spent a couple of weeks there, and then they flew me from Japan to London because they wanted me to spend some time at NPC London first. And then after, I don't know, 3 or 4 months in London.
That was for advertising, right?
China. That was for advertising, yes. Yeah. So that's...
Okay, so you went to film and then you went back to advertising. So you went you always had this back and forth between these two worlds, right?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. And then eventually you end up going back to Canada again, this time Toronto, right? And then you stay there for a while until you ascended to HOD position, which is something that can be very different from an artistic position, right? It would be interesting to know, especially coming from such a diverse background in terms of the technicality of what we do and the mediums in what we can work for as an artist, and then taking that position as an HOD that can be, very different from being an artist. Probably don't touch shots. You might think of all the shots, but you don't actually actively do the shots, right? So it's a completely different mindset. Do you wanna tell us how was that experience at that time, and why did you decide to go back to, at the moment, being an artist again? Because it seems like you are you mutate a lot between different worlds, different mediums, different roles, and it's kind of interesting because normally people, they go for a more steady kind of situation, but it seems like you go against that side a little bit.
Well, I guess if you want to keep learning, you have to get a little bit out of your comfort zone.
Definitely, yeah.
A friend of mine who's has been a supervisor and a compositor for a while, his name is Doug Campbell. I was just chatting with him, saying that I was about to go back to Canada, and my friend's company, they're hiring right now, and he got me in touch with Spin. So that was even before I went back to Canada. Before I told anyone I was going back, I just told him, and he was like, "Yeah, let me put you in touch with these guys." And so I got the job right away. That was good because I didn't have to search for a job.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, of course.
And they were looking for a comp supervisor at that time, and so they brought me in. Something I was really interested in doing for a while. I had been working when I was in China with as a VFX supervisor, leading very small teams because they were small studios. Like maybe teams of 3 to 5 people that I was leading before. I was kind of interested in seeing how it would work leading a bigger team. So yeah, that was really interesting for me, and I always loved problem solving and that head of department position. It's mostly problem solving.
Yeah, and setting teams, and for this project we're gonna do this team because the characteristics are probably different people that you probably knew already a little bit at that time. Of course, there's always, you always take a chance because probably there's more new people that are coming in that you don't know exactly if they're going to work well together or not. But probably were involved also in the recruitment, interviews, promotions of your current team from, an artistic position to probably make someone lead or supervisor. I'm assuming here, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming here, right? Because that's what normally the position.
Yeah. There was a lot that involved. There was a lot of communication with the department. The production departments. Just really a lot of problem solving, and I think I had my plate a little bit too full. I had sort of these show responsibilities and these technical responsibilities, and you're kind of like the orchestra.
Yeah, like the maestro, right?
Yeah, or something like that. And it was a lot of meetings, a lot of running around the company, a lot of talking to this person, then talking to this person, then go to a meeting, then go back to your desk, do a little bit of work, and then go talk to somebody, and then go on an interview.
Yeah. All right. Interesting. And then you decided it's time to go back to an artistic position again, right? To go out of your comfort zone again.
Yeah. It wasn't like a conscious decision. I guess I sort of go where things happen. My wife and I, we wanted to visit New Zealand. I had emailed Weta before and had a few back and forth emails with them. And so I moved and I got in touch. I was like, hey, I'm here now. And they had a big crunch time and needed some people to help push the crunch time. So they just brought me in and helped me push through that. It was sort of like a short-term contract with them. And then I got back to work for Spin remotely for a few months.
Ah, okay.
And then eventually Weta called me back and brought me in, and I've been there since.
Cool. All right. Nice story, man. It's I think it's interesting because, as I said, you're not afraid of taking risks. You're not afraid of going outside your comfort zone, which is something very rare. Especially the older we all grow, right? We tend to stay in your corner. You know what you like already. You know what you don't like, and you start taking less chances. But I think honestly, that can be I wouldn't say necessarily speaking the end of someone else's career, but that can feel like the enthusiasm is not there anymore. Because I actually tend to say that if you're too comfortable, there's something wrong with what you're doing. Because if you're too comfortable, you're not being challenged. Probably you're not putting your best, what you can actually do best in practice, because you don't feel challenged. So I always say, for many years, I always say that if you feel too comfortable, it's actually not a good thing. Might be a good feeling, but it's actually not a good thing on the long run, I would say. But at the same time,
it's not a bad thing either.
What's that?
It's not a bad thing either. If you're, I can imagine people who have families, and
that's what I was about to say, because now we are living something that, of course, everybody is looking for stability, right? Because the world is basically on fire, figuratively and literally as well. And of course, that part of things in life, stability, especially with families and all that stuff, of course, is really important. But I think, this is my personal opinion, I'm not saying that this is definitely the way to go, but I think even in those cases, and I'm also an example of that because I have a family, I have a kid, as I just mentioned, I always try to go as much as I can to feel always engaged with what I'm doing, always find new things to learn, always try to do new things, and always to be interested in what I'm doing. Because if I'm not interested in what I'm doing, I mean, I'm sure the work will show eventually. You know what I mean? So there's always a lot of things you can learn. So I think that's, again, part of what we're living at the moment can be actually time to develop all those things that probably people wouldn't do that if it wasn't for a situation like this. Let's just read a few questions that we have in here as promised. Can you please suggest how start learning programming and technical part for new? I started a couple of times and I failed. We already discussed this many times, but please go ahead, Erwan, if you want to answer that.
I do agree with what who was it? I was watching another one of the thing, and they were mentioning Code Academy, and that's actually how I learned Python as well at the time. Yeah, so that's what I did back in the day. I sort of did that to understand what the Python syntax is, and then just jump in. That's kind of how I found. I've been wanting to learn a lot of things over the years, and I failed so many times to learn things as well. And it's not until the day that I really need, that I have to use something to get it done, that's when I really I open Google and I just Google everything I need, like, oh, what's that thing, what's that thing, and until I somehow manage to put something together that works.
Yeah.
And then you do it again, and then you do it again, and little by little you start to realize, like, oh, okay, that's how this works, and eventually you kind of learn, and next time it becomes easier and easier.
Like everything in life, right? There's always the first time for everything in life, and programming is also can be very, I would say, scary at first. At least it was like very confusing for me many years ago when I started out, and I already mentioned this so many times. I'm just going to mention one more time. And I was like, I don't know, what's an API? I don't know. Then after I learned what an API was, I had difficulties of understanding what was the syntax of an API, in this case a Nux API, and the syntax of the language that I was using, or tried to come up with ways of using it, which was Python. And these two worlds, when they need to mix, I was super confused, because at that time, this was many years ago, 2013 I believe, at that time the documentation was almost non-existent regarding these things. So these days it's much easier. We have things like Code Academy. Probably it existed at that time as well. I'm not too sure. I didn't learn through that, so I don't know exactly. But I was trying to get my hands on everything that I could in terms of information. And yes, as Erwan is saying, I failed miserably so many times, and still to this day, even though I do a lot of tool development, I want to quit so many times, so many times that I want to quit. One of the most recent ones that I developed just a few months ago, actually it's been almost a year actually. Basically you do projections without a projection setup. You do a projection through a 4x4 matrix coming from a corner pin, and then you can invert the process if you want. I'll be putting this on the way on the description actually. But yeah, so many times on this example I was like, I don't have the knowledge to do this, period. I don't have it. But then there's always something when you're developing. There's always something that it will guide you through the process. There was always something very small that you discover on how to do, and that will guide you through the end of the process, right? That's probably what happened to you as well a lot of times, right?
Yeah, I was just going with I was talking to a friend at Weta recently, and I wrote a tool for the show we're currently working on using scripts. And she was like, "Oh, how did you write that? Like, what can you explain me how it works? Because I don't understand how it works." And so I had a time where I had a couple of hours, and say, "Okay, well, just come sit with me, and we'll go through the process." And I showed her that, well, okay, I started with this very simple thing. And to do that very simple thing, I even had to Google some stuff, and I showed her, like, well, I took inspiration from there, and then here's this website that shows the math behind a certain process, and here's this Wikipedia that explains this thing and this thing. And I was just showing her, like, okay, so I took this, and I took that a little bit, and then I took that, and after she showed that, she was like, oh wow, it took you a while and a lot of research to do it. And she said, that's good to hear, because when you see those tools made from other people, it feels like it just pop onto their lap, like, oh yeah, I'm just a genius. I'm just going to type all this code, and it's going to work right away.
Like coming from the sky, right?
Yeah, and so the truth of it is, like, okay, well, I have this thing I need to do. I don't know how to approach it. Just start. Okay, well, what would be the first step? Okay, what if I can... I can't tell too much because I can't tell about that tool, but what if I find a way to cast a ray from a camera? How do I cast a ray from a camera? Okay, well, I would do this. Okay, cool. Now would be the thing. Oh, well, maybe I need to find a point in space, and what's the math for this? And you iterate and iterate and fail so many times, and it's like, whoa, what's happening there? It's all broken. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I forgot a minus sign in my math there. Then you look at this article that has this crazy complex mathematical equation, and I don't know about you, but for me, I don't know the mathematic notation. Like,
I have some knowledge of that because I have a background in engineering. I'm not saying that I know everything. Of course, there's a lot of things that I don't know, but I have to research like anyone. So that
math is like high school level.
Okay, yeah.
So it's like, okay, you see those complex symbols and complex expressions, And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, that's great, but I don't know the notation. I don't know
What they
and
mean.
they use all these like A and pi and theta and
Yeah.
sigma, and you're like, okay, well, what's sigma in this case? So you're like, yeah, find me someone who implemented this in Python, and then or in some coding language, and then you're like, okay, so that's what it means because I can understand
Yeah.
the Python notation. So it's always a matter of, okay, that's the math I need. What does it mean? Break it up in little pieces, chunk it up until it's digestible, and then
Exactly.
use it. And it's not
It's
not
never
something that's
easy. It's never
and,
easy.
Yeah, don't get depressed if you fail, because I've never gotten anything out without a mistake first or two mistakes.
Oh man, a lot
so
of
many mistakes.
and as I said here many times also, when you have problems, especially when you're programming and you have like a problem that you cannot solve, that thing, if you're really into what you're doing, that thing will not go away from your brain. So you probably will dream about it. You will go to the shower with it. You'll go to meet some friends with it, always in your mind. And it's when you least expect, that's when the solution or an idea for the solution will pop inside your head. This happens to me, I would say, 90% of the time, always. And I just remember the name of the tool that I was talking about is the tool that I called Super Reconcile. You basically can reconcile a 3D point as if it was a true projection without using the 3D projection and all that stuff. So you use just one node instead of like a bunch of nodes, and then you can go back and forth with the system if you want, and a few other goodies. You can check it out on my YouTube channel. But on that tool, not only it took me months to develop, to do something that is very, very simple, which is always the intention. You want something to become very simple for everybody to use, right? That's the only intention of writing a tool. It's for simplicity, but to write it can take a long time. So failing, or a failure like that, or failing constantly, it's part of what we all do. There's always a ton of shit that you don't know, a ton of it. And as I said, even though I have this background in engineering, that didn't help me. I have to say, that didn't help me. Well, it helped me knowing some of the concepts as like a ethereal kind of a thing, some of them. But I didn't have a chance but to go and read books and go back and actually grab some books from college actually to remember some of the concepts, especially on the linear algebra side of things. So again, this is actually a very good time to learn linear algebra, and this is, I don't know how many times I've said this in this show, many times. But yeah, that's it. So don't get depressed if you're failing. We all do. So just keep going with it. That's what I would say.
I was a little bit interested in programming. I was a little bit interested in graphics. I never really realized both could be put together. But then I read The Art and Science of Digital Compositing. Yeah, so I read it a few years into my career. So I had done compositing already for like 2 years or 3 years before I read the book. And I read the book, and that's the time where it really clicked in my mind that, wait, actually everything we do in compositing is math. And we just take a number on a pixel and a number on another pixel, and we do some math between them, and it creates a result. And even though I had been compositing for a while, I had never really realized that. For me, it was like a bit magical. It was like, oh, I have this layer, and I have this other layer, and I have blending modes, and I kind of have a general ideas of what these blending modes do, but not really. So I tried a few until I find the one I want. And then after I read that, I realized, oh, it's just math that it's doing there. So if I know the math, I can predict better what the blending modes will do, and I can predict better what the tools will do. And that was really the spark that got me to look into it. And there's something that you and the other guests have mentioned before, and I know you mention all the time that you don't like to use other people's tools because you don't know how they work.
Well, it's because probably I would prefer to use something that I develop myself, that I have total control over it, and I can modify it if I want. Yeah, that's the main reason.
That's one thing actually that I think I have a slightly different approach, and I think it's been really helpful for me to learn. Is I love to use other people's tools, and there was a period where I would download every single tool on Wikipedia, every single script on Wikipedia, and then dissect them. What does this not do? What does this not do? How do they do that? And just Like I said before,
don't get me
chunk it
wrong.
up, cut it up.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Even though I like to develop my own tools and use my own tools, I learn a ton from other people's tools. Of course, yes, of course. But
Yeah.
that's actually part of my learning process. One of the ways that is my learning process is to learn with everybody, especially because we have such a big community, and people like you that share a lot of good information on their websites and all that stuff. I share some of the information. Actually, that article that I'm always mentioning, it's actually as an example. But yes, don't get me wrong. Even though I don't use them in production, for the reason that I just mentioned, I learned a ton with tools that other people use and other people wrote. Of course, that's a very good resource for learning. Definitely,
yeah. I guess that would be my advice to anyone who's learning, whether it's Python or more complex Nuke stuff. That would be my advice. Like find a tool that you like, open it up, and don't stop looking at it until you understand exactly how it works.
Yep.
And then you don't need to rewrite it. If you like it, just use it.
Yeah, but it's very
make sure you understand every single step. Like,
exactly,
because there's one step that's be like, I don't know what's going on there. You just break it down into smaller pieces until you understand what it does.
Because that's actually whether you use tools from others or your own tools or whatever, the bottom line, I would say, is you have to understand what you're using. You have to really understand the tool you're using. Can be yours, can be somebody else's, but if you don't understand how it works, when it breaks, you're stuck. You know what I mean? If you're always relying on the same stuff. So that's actually, I would say, a very good point that you're mentioning now, because the tools are there. They're there for a reason. They're there for them to be used, but you have to understand them, because if you don't understand them, I mean, you're flying blind. Right? Everything is really well until they work, but in a situation in which they don't work, you feel stuck. You don't understand the technique behind what you're using, probably. So that can be a little bit dangerous. And yeah, I mean, great resource to learn. Definitely check other people tools, because there's a very good source for learning. We have time for one more question. Okay, how long do you think it should take for the industry to adapt Python 3? Should we worry about that now or wait a few years? Do you want to answer that?
Sure, I can give it a try. Well, officially, Python 2 has been dead for 9 months now. I into very weird behaviors with Python, and I was like, oh, what's going on here? That's really weird. Or I've got to do this weird workaround. And then they fixed that in Python 3.2. But there's so many things a lot of things that I've wasted a lot of time on in the last few years in Python are stuff that would have been 2 lines of code in Python 3.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really excited about Python 3 coming. Now, it's going to take a little while. Even though probably, the VFX platform, I think 2020 and 2021 has Python 3 in there. It might be 2021. That means all the major VFX software should start having Python 3 APIs. It might still take a time because of studios pipelines, and
yeah, it might take a while.
Especially big studios.
Yeah.
I don't know if people realize that, but the pipelines that big studios have is years and years and years of code built on top of each other, and you always have core parts of the pipeline that are built on, and it's a big engine, it's a big thing,
but
isn't
Python 3 backwards compatible with Python whatever version from Python 2?
Not necessarily.
This is a question, I don't know, because even though I write a lot of things in Python, I always do things in the hard way. I'm not sure if it's backwards compatible or not. I know that PySide is not, and that's an issue.
Yeah, so anything that's compiled, so PySide is sort of just a bridge to Qt itself. So Qt would be built, PySide would be built against different versions of Qt and different versions of Python. So anything that's sort of compiled like that would need that There's a version of PySide for Python 3. Actually, I think I'm not sure. I might be lying here, but I believe that officially now we're using PySide 2 in Nuke.
Yeah, which breaks whatever you did on PySide 1.
Right.
Which is very annoying, I have to say.
I believe that there is no official release of PySide 2 for Python. Sorry, yeah. There's no official release of PySide 2 for Python 2. I think that the official release of PySide 2 is actually for Python 3, and that either the Foundry or somebody else in VFX made it happen for Python 2. But if you look at online resources for PySide 2, it's nearly all for Python 3. And no, it's not compatible.
No, I know that from PyQt or PySide, it's not compatible because I suffered that. I learned that in the hard way, basically.
But even standard Python, there's a lot of things that break. For example, if you have a print statement, that's not in Python 3 anymore.
Is it not?
Now it's a print function, so you got to call it with parentheses.
Okay.
But there's little things like that if you try to run the code, it will just error, basically. So there's
so that can be a problem, yeah.
There are ways to write code that's compatible with both. They have all these future imports and this sort of like special ways of making code that's cross-compatible. But really, if you take any code that's been written at any facility, any studio, that's been written 80 years ago, it's most likely they haven't planned for Python 3. There's going to be a lot of code rewriting, and as you change things, there's always easily bugs introduced. So I think it's going to take some time for all studios to
adopt that.
Make the transition. And some studios that have bigger pipeline teams might be able to do it faster. Some studios that have smaller pipeline and a lot less code, they might also be able to do it faster. But any studio with very heavy pipeline might take them a few years to transition.
Yeah, because if it's not backwards compatible, of course that can break a lot of years of development, which is a big no-no for obvious reasons. All right, so you know what's time for, right? Okay, so let's start with something a little bit, I would say, more simple. You tell me. Volumetrics.
Volumetrics. Damn, you're catching me on the spot there. Cheap volumetrics, you can use God rays.
Cool. That's a good answer, I would say.
Fancy volumetrics, you can ask Mads. He's working on something cool there.
Yeah. All right, cool. Moving sky.
Moving sky. Oh, you ask that one all the time. You know what? I either just go with a skew or a little bit of a nice distort with the luminance of the clouds.
Cool. Fake reflections.
I wrote a Blink script for that.
I know that you wanna you would say something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So you're on.
Pretty accurate. Or just the reflection shader and the ray trace node.
Okay. Cool. Hazing.
Hazing. I like to use deep for that at work, but that's not everyone has that. Just a Z depth and a bit of add and a bit of color in there. The stuff that you did in the particle tutorial, you blur the image, mix that with your Z depth, put it over.
Cool. Fake subsurface.
I haven't really done that one. I done some stuff where I sort of blur the highlights and max them and color them onto the image. It didn't look great. Did the trick.
That's all it matters, I would say, right? If it does a trick, it does a trick. Cool. Now this is a question, and we're gonna end with this one from more compositing supervisor / HUD point of view. Top 3 integration tips.
integration as in
integration CG
CG onto a plate?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there's the generic stuff like match the blacks, match the whites. Focus on the saturation. Also, I don't hear that one. I don't hear that one mentioned very often, but I did notice people do their blacks perfectly, they do their whites perfectly, but then they get a color that's like way more saturated than the plate in there, and it just breaks. For me, breaks integration, or they would have colors that are way less saturated than the plate. I think it's important to match your saturation on top of your black and whites.
Yeah.
Softness, definitely match softness. If you have crisp, sharp CG on any real plates, I've never seen a crisp, sharp plate.
Yeah.
So
those three.
Destroy that CG. Yeah. Okay, that's 3. Okay.
3. Yeah. Cool. Nice. That was cool, man. Yeah, we did a few new ones that we haven't done before, like this last one that we just spoke. So that was a good one. Thank you for playing along.
I'm just glad I don't have that ticking music. That
no, you cannot hear it, but everybody can. Everybody but you, including me. I can hear it. That's great, right? All right. So listen, everyone. Thank you very much for reaching out, offering yourself to be part of the show. I think people really liked. We had a lot of engagement with questions. Actually, I think we have one more just to finish off. All right.
Yeah, I think we skipped a few. I might go back in the chat later and try to answer those. But
all right. So the last one is from Compositing Academy. Good to hear to know that Compositing Academy is on the show. Thank you for showing up. So the question is, you have some interesting stuff about vectors and matrix tools in Nuke on your website. Do you know any other resource for people looking to get better at these topics? Do you wanna offer your? Because I can answer that as well.
Yes. You can also give your answer. More answers is always better. But
yep.
I would recommend Khan Academy.
Yeah, good one.
They do a lot of very well explained math, and that's my go-to when I need when I start on a subject and I don't quite know what it's talking about. I search it online, and I've always had really good success with Khan Academy explaining these math topics, and then once you understand the basics, it's a lot easier to work with it.
Yeah,
what's your take on it?
My take is definitely that's like, I would say, like one of the primary ones. Khan Academy, definitely really well explained. It's been around for several years now, so you probably will see the topic explained in different years with different resolutions and all that stuff, but always great content, especially things like that we use all the time and can be very useful for compositing and visual effects in general. Linear algebra, they have like a very good section there. There's also one, because normally linear algebra, when I was in college, I learned linear algebra extensively. I wasn't particularly good at it because I didn't understand why we were doing what we were doing, matrices and all that stuff. So sometimes you miss the visual point of what you're doing, and I think that's super, super important. At least it is for me. Super important to have like a visual reference of what you're doing with matrices do with whatever you're learning this for. You know what I mean? So there's one website, there's one channel called, I believe, 3Blue1 or something like that. I'll be putting this on the chat, and it basically not only explains you what it is, it gives you a visual representation in space of what the operation is doing to your object or to your image. And I think that's, for me, that it's super, super important to have that context, that visual side of things.
I think that guy is a guest teacher in Khan Academy as well.
It is? So there you go.
Yeah.
Cool. So that will be my two top sources. Also, one of them coincides with Erwan just mentioned here, but definitely check those out. And yeah, thank you once again for playing along with everything, Erwan, including the note fight. And
thanks for having me.
Wish you all the best. Hope to have you on the show again at some point in the future. Okay, don't worry about it for now. we'll see what that happens. But anyway,
Cool.
guys, thank you for watching once again. The next show will be in about 1 week. I'll be putting the banner as usual at some point during these next days. And thank you once again, and stay safe and start learning new things. If you haven't registered for what's coming, as I just mentioned in the beginning, and it's part of the teaser that you can find on our channel, please register and you'll be able to know exactly what's gonna happen at some point. All right, I'm not saying dates yet, but I will soon. All right, bye bye guys, and everyone stay in the line, as they usually say, because we're gonna have a final set between us. Yeah, all right, bye bye guys, see ya.
All right. See you.